Welcome to the deep dive. You know, if there's one idea that just keeps coming up in everything we discuss, success, legacy, leadership, it's this concept of formation, how a person is, well, built to handle life.
And we're kicking things off today with what is probably the ultimate statement on that topic. It's a line from the book of Proverbs that has just echoed for thousands of years. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he's old, he will not depart from it.
That verse is our launching pad for this entire deep dive. And our mission today, just to be clear, it isn't about theology or, specific parenting styles. It's much more fundamental than that.
Right.
We're digging into a really compelling stack of sources. We've got historical analyses, daily guidance notes, even some deep dives into classical virtues and psychological principles, all to answer one core question: how? How do you actually create that kind of lasting character?
And what's fascinating is what the sources show us. The secret to that persistence, to making sure that training holds even when he is old, it's not in the syllabus. It's not in the lecture hall.
It's on the stage.
Exactly. It's the silent curriculum.
Yeah.
The real training happens not in what's said, but in what's done, especially when it really, really matters.
Okay, so let's start right there. Let's start where the stakes are the absolute highest. In those moments of huge disappointment or even public failure, because that, I think, is where the real training actually happens. So if the goal is that lifelong persistence, that really deep habituation of a response, we're talking about something that goes way beyond just, temporary compliance.
Oh, completely. We're talking about embedding virtues so deeply that they become your default setting.
Right.
It's the response that just takes over when you don't have time to think.
Right. It's your muscle memory.
It's a muscle memory for integrity.
Yeah.
And that idea of deep habituation is so key, and it's why the time frame in the proverb, even when he is old, is so important.
Why is that?
Well, if the character training doesn't last into old age, then it was never really character to begin with. It was just compliance. It was driven by some external pressure like avoiding a punishment or trying to get approval.
That makes sense.
Genuine character has to stand up to decades of pressure, to changing social norms, to personal crises. It has to become, like you said, muscle memory.
And the clearest time to see that muscle memory in action is when someone gets hit with something totally unexpected, a blow that is just deeply unfair.
Yes.
And this brings us to a historical moment that our sources frame as a masterclass in grace. It's a moment that was observed by a young woman named Margaret Roberts, who we would all later know as Margaret Thatcher.
The incident itself takes place in 1952. Margaret's father, Alfred Roberts, was a decocker. He was a deeply committed public servant. He'd spent 9 years in local government, even served as the mayor of Grantham.
He was a pillar of his community.
Absolutely. It's a foundational figure. This service was a massive personal commitment for him.
9 years. 9 years of service. That's not a hobby. That's a huge part of your life's work. And then, just because of a shift in local politics, a rival party wins an election, he's essentially pushed out of office. Removed.
And the sources describe it as a brutal political defeat. It was a moment where everything he had poured himself into publicly just seemed to be, invalidated overnight.
Just think about the emotional state you'd be in. That situation is just ripe for bitterness.
Oh, completely. The natural human reaction would be to lash out, right? To blame your opponents, say the system is rigged, to let that sense of personal injustice just consume you.
We see it all the time. People in the modern world lose their cool completely when they lose a big project or miss a promotion they worked years for.
Exactly. It's a moment of profound psychological stress. And yet, his response, what's documented in the sources we have, it was one of just extraordinary dignity and restraint. It was a masterclass in equanimity, and his daughter was watching the whole thing.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics. What did he actually say?
His remarks when he left office are really highlighted as the definitive lesson. He stood up and said, "It is now almost 9 years since I took up these robes in honor, and now I trust in honor they are laid down."
Wow. I have to just pause on that focus on honor. I trust in honor they are laid down. Especially when he's just been, unfairly thrown out. It completely changes the narrative away from him being a victim.
It does. He's not dwelling on the injustice done to him. He's doubling down on the integrity he maintained throughout the process.
It's a refusal. He's refusing to let the bitterness of other people corrupt his own internal code.
And that's the absolute core difference between a reactive life and a life driven by principles. He just didn't let external circumstances define his worth. His next statement just solidifies this self-control. He says, "I was content to be in, and I am content to be out."
That's a challenging statement, isn't it? It almost sounds too easy, a bit too stoic. But he's not saying he wasn't disappointed.
No, not at all. He was saying that his internal state, his contentment, was separate from his external position. He even added this line, "Although I have toppled over, I have fallen on my feet."
Falling on my feet. That's such a powerful metaphor for internal stability.
It is. It shows that his character was the anchor, not the job title. And he modeled for his daughter, without a single word of lecture, that external circumstances don't define us. Only our response to them does. The lesson was delivered right in the middle of his own pain.
I think this is a huge point for anyone listening, especially if you lead a team or are raising kids. We try to teach integrity with, little sayings or lectures about doing the right thing.
Right.
But the real lesson, the one that sticks, as Alfred Roberts showed, is taught when you're the one who's been mistreated. When the sources confirm, you've been screwed over and it really hurts.
Exactly. It's when the cost of integrity is highest. When holding your tongue or choosing dignity over getting even is genuinely painful, that's when the lesson gets imprinted on the observer.
It's easy to talk about sportsmanship when you win the game.
But you teach character when you keep your poise after a bad call costs you the championship.
So if you're mentoring someone or if your kid is watching you lose a big contract at work, the training isn't about shielding them from that. You can't stop the competitor from winning or the market from turning.
No.
The training is modeling how to meet that adversity with grace. Whether you succeed or fail in the end, it's about showing them in that moment how to keep your cool.
Because the opposite is also true, right? That negative habit gets imprinted just as deeply.
Yeah.
If the adult model just dissolves into rage or public bitterness every time there's a setback, well, that's the default response that's being set.
The integrity has to hold. And the power of that quiet demonstration, like Alfred Roberts choosing his words so carefully after 9 years of his work, was just dismissed. You just can't match that with a lecture.
You can't.
And that kind of response, that ability to stay composed when everything is falling apart, that isn't built in one big moment. It's built through persistent, quiet, daily effort. It requires a whole foundation of habits.
Which brings us right to our next section. We're moving from that high-stakes drama of political loss to the often invisible work that makes that kind of composure possible in the first place.
Right, the foundation.
To get to that lifelong, persistent character we were just talking about, you need the virtue of diligence. Character growth isn't some sudden flash of insight. It's the slow, careful, persistent effort you apply day after day, even when no one is watching.
And this is where we immediately hit a wall with, modern instant gratification culture. We are so wired now to want immediate feedback, the likes, the comments, the next day delivery. Diligence is, by its nature, a long game.
And it can feel tedious.
It can. But the classical perspective, which our sources reflect, sees this effort as something more than just hard work. Miguel de Cervantes called diligence the mother of success. It's listed as one of the 7 heavenly virtues for a reason.
Why is that, specifically?
Because it reflects a deep respect for the process itself. The sources call it a perennial nobleness and even sacredness in work. That idea of sacredness, the idea that the quality of the effort itself has value regardless of the immediate outcome, that's fascinating. It separates real diligence from, say, frantic hustle.
It's a huge distinction. Hustle is often about getting external validation. Diligence is about pursuing internal excellence.
So it's the steady cultivation of excellence for its own sake.
Exactly. It's that commitment to doing the job right, even when you could cut corners and nobody would ever know. When you train someone in diligence, you're training them to set their own standards of quality. And that is crucial for maintaining integrity when the external systems fail you.
But, and this is a big but, effort, no matter how diligent, can be totally wasted if you're aiming it at the wrong thing. We've all seen people work incredibly hard on things they just couldn't influence.
Absolutely. And that's why diligence has to be paired rigorously with the virtue of prudence.
Okay, so prudence, what is that exactly?
Prudence is like the operational intelligence of character. It's the wisdom to distinguish, with almost ruthless clarity, between what you can control and what you cannot. This might be the single most powerful self-management skill you can embed in someone.
It sounds a lot like the Stoic dichotomy of control.
It's essentially that, applied to daily life and your biggest goals.
Okay, so let's make this concrete. In a modern professional setting, what are the things we actually can control?
Internally, you control your preparation. You control the level of effort you decide to bring to a task. You control how you respond to a setback or to criticism. Do you learn from it, or do you get defensive?
All right.
You control the deliberate, focused improvement of your own skills and your emotional regulation. All of these are 100% internal controllable inputs.
And what we can't control are the outcomes, the external stuff.
Precisely. You can't control if your company wins the contract. You can't control how the stock market reacts. You can't control if you get the promotion or if you get the recognition you think you deserve. Prudence trains you to pour your energy into the first list, not the second.
And if we look back at Alfred Roberts, that's exactly what he was modeling, right? He couldn't control the election result.
No.
But he could control his response, his dignity, the honor with which he, as he put it, laid down his robes. It was a perfect display of prudence under extreme pressure.
It was. And when you realize this, it frees you up to just focus on building your capabilities regardless of any immediate reward. This is the whole idea behind that old saying, dig the well before you're thirsty.
Right. You don't wait for the crisis to hit before you start building the habits and skills.
You don't. A project manager who practices prudence. She knows she can't guarantee the client will love the final product. That's an external variable. But what she can guarantee is that every single person on her team is trained to the highest possible standard, that all the quality checks are followed without fail, and that the communication is transparent. That's digging the well. You focus on the system of delivery, so when the opportunity comes, the foundation is solid.
I think if you make that shift, it fundamentally changes how you define success. If success is only the external outcome, like winning the bid, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment.
But if success is defined by the quality of your controllable inputs, your diligence and your prudence, then fulfillment is something you can achieve every single day.
And there's a perfect modern model for this philosophy of all places in high-stakes professional football, specifically in the coaching philosophy of Tony Dungy.
The Dungy approach is so interesting because it's kind of radical. He basically told his team to stop focusing on traditional quantitative metrics.
Meaning the scoreboard, the win-loss record.
Exactly. He recognized those things were often influenced by things they couldn't control. A bad call from a ref, a key player getting injured, the other team just having an amazing day.
So what did he focus on instead?
His focus was entirely qualitative. He believed that if his team just excelled in the areas they could control, the wins would eventually take care of themselves. So he trained them to measure their success by 3 internal controllable metrics.
And the first one is deceptively simple. It was, is the team playing up to its potential?
Right. Not are we playing better than the other team, but are we playing up to our own potential? That requires brutal self-honesty and a commitment to daily improvement. No excuses.
The second was about continuous growth. Is the team improving year over year? So that builds in diligence and a long-term perspective. It punishes just coasting.
And the third, which speaks directly to character beyond the game, was, is the team being an asset to its community? This embedded a sense of justice and responsibility into their daily lives. The character had to be holistic.
What's so amazing about those 3 measures is that even if the team had a losing season, they could still walk away with a sense of internal success. They could say, we played to our potential, we got better, and we served our community.
It's a massive psychological buffer against the inevitable failures of any career.
It really is.
It trusts that process comes before results. His principle was simple. A little improvement each day makes a big difference over time. When you train a person with this mindset, you're making them resilient. Their job is to make themselves ready and then trust for the outcome.
So that connection between diligence and prudence is the engine. Diligence gives you the effort, and prudence aims that effort at something you can actually hit, which is always your own character and your own capability.
And a lot of the time, making yourself ready means taking a path that feels deeply uncomfortable, because real growth requires risk. And that brings us to the courage you need for excellence.
We've laid out that character is built on this quiet foundation of diligence and prudence. But if that character is going to actually serve you for a lifetime, it has to be tested, right?
It has to be. Meaningful growth requires you to venture out of your comfort zone and risk a genuine public failure.
This is where the internal virtues meet the external world, and the friction can be pretty intense.
Oh, it is. If you're aiming for anything truly ambitious, starting a business, getting a tough degree, taking a leadership role that really stretches you, you have to accept that you might just fall flat on your face.
There's that great quote from Muhammad Ali, if your dreams don't scare you, they aren't big enough. And the scare factor isn't just about the amount of work, it's about the exposure.
Absolutely. The risk exposes you to judgment, to criticism, and to the very real possibility of falling short in public, which, for most people, is way scarier than the hard work itself.
It's one thing to practice your big presentation in private. It's another thing to actually give it to a room full of investors who might just tell you it's a terrible idea.
Right. And this fear isn't just an internal thing. It often comes from how the world reacts to your ambition. Sheena Alexander made this really sharp observation. She said, "The sad truth is that excellence makes people nervous."
That's interesting. Nervous in what way?
Well, on multiple levels.
Yeah.
It makes us nervous internally because excellence demands more from us, more commitment, more effort, the constant choice to pursue quality over just doing what's easy. It forces you to confront your own potential, and that can feel heavy.
But it also makes other people nervous.
Yes, when someone really pursues excellence, it challenges the status quo around them. It holds up a mirror to mediocrity or complacency, even if that's not the intention. And so the environment itself can become kind of hostile to the person with high standards.
So to train for excellence, you're also training people and yourself to just get comfortable with that nervousness, both the internal pressure and the external pushback.
You are. And that requires a deep internal resilience. It requires the virtue of fortitude.
So fortitude, this isn't about physical strength.
No, not at all. It's the moral and psychological strength that lets you stick to your principles, your dignity, your prudence, your diligence, even when the world is screaming at you that you failed.
When you have that deep character as a foundation, fortitude lets you completely redefine what failure even means.
It stops being a personal indictment. It just becomes data. Confucius summarized this perfectly. He said, "A man is great not because he hasn't failed. A man is great because failure hasn't stopped him."
And I think this is where that training through example really shows its value. If you've been trained by watching someone like Alfred Roberts, who modeled integrity in his own defeat, then when you fail, you're more likely to default to fortitude.
You treat the setback as part of the journey, not the end of the road.
Whereas if your character is underdeveloped, a professional failure getting laid off, a business going under, can feel like this fundamental proof that you're unworthy.
Exactly. And that leads to withdrawal or paralysis or lashing out. Training someone in fortitude means teaching them the sequence. Acknowledge the failure, analyze the facts, and then keep moving.
And that second step, analyzing the facts, that requires a lot of honesty. You have to be willing to face reality no matter how harsh it is.
Absolutely. There's a crucial reminder in our sources. If you close your eyes to facts, you will learn through accidents. Fortitude requires objectivity. You have to review the failure dispassionately. You distinguish what you control, what you can learn from this, from what you don't, which is the past outcome.
Denying the facts just guarantees you'll make the same mistake again.
And probably with worse consequences.
Okay, so we have diligence for the effort, prudence for the target, and fortitude for the resilience. But ambition and drive, even with high fortitude, can become self-destructive if they're not checked. We see it all the time with high achievers. Burnout, obsession.
And that's why we need the fourth pillar here, which is the virtue of temperance. Temperance, in the classical sense, is all about avoiding excess and maintaining balance. It's often simplified down to just avoiding gluttony, but it really applies to every appetite, every impulse.
So, in a modern context, temperance isn't just about food or drink. It's about avoiding workaholism, avoiding drowning in information, avoiding the kind of immediate emotional reactions that social media thrives on.
It's the internal brake that prevents self-destruction. Temperance is what ensures that the pursuit of your big goals doesn't completely consume you. It prevents the burnout and loss of perspective that leads people to sacrifice their health or their relationships for a short-term win.
It's what makes the trajectory sustainable, which reminds me of that Brian Tracy quote, "It doesn't matter where you came from, all that matters is where you were going."
And character training, through this balanced application of diligence, prudence, fortitude, and temperance, gives a person that internal governance system they need for a sustainable, positive trajectory no matter where they started from.
Right.
It gives them the tools to direct their own future instead of being defined by their past or by external pressures.
But all of these virtues, which are focused on how we manage ourselves and our work, they feel incomplete. They're incomplete if they aren't connected to how we treat other people. The greatest competence in the world without a moral compass is a danger, not an asset.
And this is the crucial intersection. This is where skills meet values. If we only teach technical competence, the facts, the systems, the strategies, we create a person who is very capable, but who might lack the internal guidance to use that capability responsibly.
Aristotle's critique on this is just timeless, isn't it? Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all.
We can train the mind in every known skill. We can teach coding, advanced finance, whatever. But if we haven't equally trained the heart in virtues like justice, charity, and hope, then the education is, well, it's fundamentally incomplete. You risk creating a highly efficient but unprincipled person.
And that unprincipled competence is the definition of dangerous. That reliability, that trustworthiness, it has to start with the virtue of justice.
Justice, at its core, is the foundational principle of fairness. It's treating others as you would want to be treated. It's the golden rule, applied consistently, and it establishes the baseline of integrity that makes a person reliable.
It sounds simple, but let's talk about the cost of justice in the real world. Justice often runs directly counter to self-interest or what's popular. Can you give us an example of that?
Sure. Imagine a leader running a business. They have a top salesperson who brings in a huge amount of revenue, but is also notoriously rude and dismissive to the support staff.
Okay.
A failure of justice would be to ignore that bad behavior because the salesperson is making the company money. Modeling justice, however, means the leader has to confront that unfair treatment directly, even if it risks losing that top performer.
So you sacrifice the short-term gain for long-term relational integrity.
You have to. And this integrity, this reliability, is what builds trust in any relationship. Our source material is very clear. All bonds are built on trust. Without it, you have nothing. The person trained in justice is reliable because their word actually means something. They're governed by fairness, not just what benefits them in the moment.
But justice alone can be cold, can't it? It needs the warmth of charity. Justice ensures you treat everyone equally, but charity introduces that strong sense of caring, the active desire to help others.
And this creates a fascinating paradox, because pure, blind charity, driven only by emotion, can sometimes override common sense.
Right. You want to help so badly that you end up enabling destructive behavior, or you make an unwise choice that hurts the person you're trying to help, or even yourself.
That is the critical balancing act. The training requires integrating the heart and the mind, where charity is balanced by prudence, that wisdom we talked about earlier. You need compassion, but you also need discernment. You need to know when to give someone a tool versus when you're just giving a handout.
Les Brown talks about the outcome of this. He says, help others achieve their dreams and you will achieve yours. But it has to be wise help. If you're mentoring someone who is brilliant but lazy, wise charity is helping them build diligence, not just doing their work for them so the project succeeds.
Precisely. The truly educated individual has both the competence of the mind and the character of the heart. They can solve hard problems, and they can solve them ethically, with real consideration for the well-being of others.
So this whole formation metaphor, it isn't just about transferring knowledge, it's about shaping a person's entire approach to life. It's building these habits of justice and charity so deeply that they become the automatic response when there's no time to think.
The inner architecture is already built. The habits hold. When you are under intense stress or you're tired and an opportunity for a selfish action comes up, the default setting, the character you were trained in, is what takes over.
Which brings us to the final layer of this formation. The internal belief system you need to keep those habits going over the long haul, especially when the results aren't obvious yet.
To sustain that diligent effort, those prudent choices, and that courageous fortitude for a whole lifetime, especially when the payoff is far down the road, you require the virtues of faith and hope.
In this context, these virtues are like psychological anchors. They allow a disciplined person to keep going even when there's no immediate tangible proof of success. So faith, as a virtue, is about avoiding that paralyzing uncertainty by just trusting the process.
It means trusting that if you focus on incremental improvement, if you maintain your integrity, if you choose justice, that it will ultimately bear fruit, even if that positive result is decades away. It's the belief that quality and character matter in the long run, even if the current climate suggests they don't.
And this brings us right back to Tony Dungy, doesn't it? Trusting for the results while staying completely focused on preparation. You do your part, the controllable inputs, and you have faith the outcome will eventually reflect the quality of that input.
And when you inevitably hit those setbacks and delays, the virtue of hope, which is the avoidance of despair, is absolutely essential. Hope is the enduring belief that the path still matters, even if the view from where you are is bleak.
Let's think back to Alfred Roberts in 1952. When he was pushed out of office, he had no way of knowing that his response would become this foundational lesson for his daughter, who would one day lead the country.
None at all.
He just knew that modeling grace and integrity was the right thing to do, regardless of the immediate outcome or what his political future held. That is hope in action. It's the conviction that your character matters more than your temporary circumstances.
And the compounding effect of this consistent approach is just huge. Growth almost never happens in one big dramatic moment. It comes from countless small choices you make every day. Choosing diligence over taking it easy, choosing justice over self-interest.
And these little improvements, they stack up, not just in your skills, but in your character's memory. The student watches Alfred Roberts handle disappointment with dignity once, and they don't have to relearn that lesson every single time they face a setback. The habit holds. The character is stable.
And this is where that ancient wisdom delivers its final and most sobering challenge, particularly to those of us who think of ourselves as parents or mentors or leaders.
The training is delivered through you.
That's it. The implicit truth of that proverb is simple, but it's incredibly demanding. We cannot give what we do not have.
You can't train others in virtues you haven't cultivated in yourself. If you want them to be composed under pressure, you have to be composed under pressure. If you want them to value diligence, you can't be settling for mediocrity in your own life.
The entire power of the Thatcher story rests on the fact that her father lived his values when it was costly to do so. It was painful, it was disappointing, and yet his character held firm. He wasn't giving a lecture, he was giving a demonstration. And that is the opportunity and the responsibility for anyone who influences others.
So if you're the one setting the example, in a boardroom, on a team, in your own home, you're teaching a core lesson in character every time you respond to a blow. Every time you're unfairly criticized, every time a project fails, every time someone else gets the credit, their eyes are on you.
Yeah, the ultimate question for all of us is, have we been trained through our own practice and the examples we've followed to keep our integrity and focus when those trials hit? Because when you are in that moment of crisis, the eyes of the next generation are watching you. You are modeling the way they should go, whether you intend to or not.
This has been a deep dive into the very architecture of persistent character, and it's all guided by this principle that formation happens through lived example, especially when that example comes at a cost.
Let's just quickly sum up the key takeaways. First, character training is primarily about that lived example under pressure, that crucial Thatcher moment where demonstrating integrity is painful but essential.
Second, real progress and stability demand focused, persistent effort diligence. And that effort must be aimed only at what you can control, guided by prudence.
And finally, the education of the heart, justice, charity, hope has to be fully integrated with the education of the mind. That's what ensures that competence serves a principled life.
The core lesson here really is that the habits you're building today, the integrity you are modeling under your own pressure, that will hold for a lifetime. And not just for you, but for everyone who is watching you define what it means to succeed, and maybe more importantly, what it means to fail with dignity.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to consider. What small choice, made today with integrity and diligence, will you make? Maybe it's choosing that persistent quality effort over a quick win. Maybe it's responding to an unfair critique with composed analysis instead of a high-head reply. You have to trust that this small choice is building a deep, enduring habit that will serve you and those watching you for decades to come. What virtuous path are you modeling today?